Hey everyone, I'm the Canadian lad, and today I watched What If episode 4 at 0.2 Fabic speed, and my goodness, what an episode that was. It had good storytelling, amazing voiceovers, and really high stakes. Some things you don't often get together in an animated episode. So hands down, this was the best episode in this series so far. So I'm gonna go shot by shot, and if any scenes happen to have an Easter egg or a detail that I caught in slow motion, I'll explain that along the way. But before we get into that, I'd like to tell you about our awesome longtime sponsor, Cove. There's only one thing better than having one high-quality Bluetooth speaker, having one that turns into two Bluetooth speakers. It's a hidden feature you wouldn't expect, but also provides a fantastic stereo sound experience. They're perfect for listening to music or podcasts, or even editing videos when I want to take a break from my headphones. The Cove speaker is small enough to carry around easily, but the sound it delivers is high quality and loud enough to use with a group of friends or family. With 7 hours of playback on a single charge, you'll be able to watch Avengers Endgame twice and still have battery left over. And if you ever need to take calls, the Cove Commuter 2 comes with a built-in microphone, making it perfect for taking calls. Now with my code CL68, you can save 67% off or more on your very own Commuter 2 speaker, which would make it one of the most affordable unique speakers out there. So if you want your very own Commuter 2, click on my link in the description to save some money on an awesome speaker. So for today's episode, Benedict Cumberbatch, Rachel McAdams, Benedict Wong, and Tilda Swinton all come back to reprise their roles. Now this episode asks the question, what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands? Now this heart is of course a metaphor for Christine Palmer, the love of Stephen Strange. So in this universe, their relationship is slightly better than what we've seen in the main timeline. Actually, let me rephrase that. In this universe, the most valuable thing in Stephen's life isn't his steady hands, but the love of his life, Christine Palmer. And fate has it that Stephen will always have to lose the most valuable thing he has in order to begin his journey as Sorcerer Supreme. Anyway, the episode begins with Stephen picking up Christine in his black Lamborghini that we've seen in live action as well. He picks her up and they're on their way to an event where Stephen is supposed to receive an award. So in this universe, Christine agreed to go with Stephen, whereas in the main timeline she didn't.
I'm talking tonight at a neurological society dinner.
Another speaking engagement?
You love coming to those things with me. We had fun together.
No, you had fun. They weren't about us, they were about you.
Her going along with Stephen already establishes the fact that their relationship is at a better stage than the live-action one. So on their way, they both discuss how the speech is gonna be. Christine mentions how Stephen successfully performed a hemispherectomy.
You performed a radical hemispherectomy. I would call that quite remarkable.
Which is true, because hemispherectomy is a rare surgery, where half of the brain is either removed or disconnected from the other half, which is basically the synopsis of this episode, because Stephen will get split into two versions of himself by the end. Now, after the tragic accident, Stephen's car lands the exact same way as it does in the movie, even though he did manage a narrow escape initially, but then eventually he gets rear-ended, which completely threw his car out of control. Now, detail like this is what I love. Notice when Stephen's Lamborghini took a hit from the back, it made a huge dent. Now, this scene only had 23 frames, and yet the animators made sure to put this huge dent on the back of the car to make it look more plausible. Hats off to the VFX team once again. Now, shattered by the loss of Christine, Stephen goes on a self-healing journey to Kamartaj and ends up becoming the Sorcerer Supreme within time. This is exactly what happened in live action as well, but he of course went to Kamartaj for different reasons. But despite becoming the Sorcerer Supreme, this version of Strange just couldn't let go of the past. Having the eye of Agamotto on the palm of his hand always enticed him with the idea of bringing Christine back. We see the same two axes on the right-hand side of the sanctum as in the movie. However, the movie version had a cage on the left side that Doctor Strange used to captivate Caecilius. That has been replaced in this universe. We then learn that it has been 2 years since Christine passed away, and Wong warns Stephen to come join him for a tea instead of doing something reckless.
I suggest you join me before you do something reckless.
So Wong is warning Stephen not to use the Eye of Agamotto to get Christine back to life. So it seems as though no matter what timeline it is, Wong is always warning Stephen before he does anything reckless. But Stephen, with his annoyingly beautiful personality, decides to do it anyway. He goes back in time and picks up Christine again. And Christine, however, feels something is a little different about this Stephen Strange. This Stephen cares a lot more about her than what she was anticipating, mainly because this Stephen already knows what it's like to lose her. Now this time around, Stephen doesn't overtake this truck and sticks to his lane, but he again ends up getting rear-ended and they crash lands on the river, resulting once again with Christine's death. So Stephen goes back in time again, picking her up once more. Now this is the third time, by the way. But notice this time, when closing the door of the car, Steven looks at Christine a bit longer. That's why we see his reflection on the window. Whereas in the first time around, he closed the door and immediately started walking over to the driver's seat. So him staying and looking at Christine a bit longer now indicates the rapid change in Steven and how he has started to value each second he spends with Christine. But again, he suffers the same consequences. No matter what he does, Christine always ends up dying. It doesn't necessarily have to be a car crash though, as we see her getting shot, getting heart attack and whatnot. So as a last-ditch effort, Steven gives it another go by not showing up at all. So at this point, Steven was ready to gamble with a relationship if that would ensure her survival. But of course, it doesn't, as Steven later watches a news broadcast of an explosion at her apartment building. Now notice the anchor confirming Palmer's demise is Christine Everhart, who was seen in Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2. Leslie Bibb actually came back to voice over this character as well. We then learned through the Ancient One that the death of Christine Palmer is an absolute point in time, meaning there's no way to get around it. Preventing an absolute point, even though it's near impossible, would literally destroy the space-time continuum. Without Christine's death, the journey of Doctor Strange never begins. So it's like a paradox. If you go back in time and kill your grandfather, then your father or mother wouldn't have been born. So you wouldn't have been born. So you wouldn't have been able to go back in time to kill your grandfather in the first place. Same way, if Doctor Strange prevents Christine's death, he doesn't become the Sorcerer Supreme. So he will never be able to go back in time to save Christine in the first place. Ancient One actually confirms it at the end of the episode.
You cannot save her, Stephen. The resulting temporal paradox will destroy this universe.
Now, fans of Doctor Who will be familiar with this concept. Absolute points are key events in history that no one can alter. In Doctor Who, this means the deaths of key individuals that can't be stopped, even by the Doctor himself. And in this episode, a different Doctor is held back by the same laws of nature. But this adamant version of Strange just wouldn't listen. He believes there's knowledge he's yet to grasp, and that could unlock his ability of bringing Christine back. Well, he wasn't wrong, as Steven goes to look for the lost library of Cagliostro, and there he learns that if he absorbs enough powers from other creatures, he will be able to alter an absolute point. Now, this friendly neighborhood librarian is O'Bane, who apparently has no issues even if you summon monsters in the library. Now, O'Bane is actually Cagliostro himself in the Marvel Comics. An adversary to Doctor Strange, Cagliostro was a powerful and ancient sorcerer, who not only studied the Darkhold that we've seen Wanda reading at the end of WandaVision, but also trained Doctor Doom in time traveling. And notice Steven did ask O'Bane if he's Cagliostro himself, but he was quick to debunk it.
Please tell me you're not Cagliostro.
The name's Obang, librarian for the books of Cagliostro.
I also believe this is not Cagliostro, because Cagliostro in the comics is Asian and was born in India, but this character isn't. And I don't think Marvel would let go of a chance to cast another Asian actor considering their willingness to diversify. So yes, they pretty much separated O'Bane from Cagliostro and made it into two characters. O'Bane then takes Steven to this temple, which has two giant statues of an animal that looks like a lion but has wings on them. It also doesn't have any doors despite its massive size, probably to restrict this place so that only those who possess a sling ring can open a portal and enter it. Steven comes across multiple runes that look really similar to what we've seen in WandaVision. I'll talk more about it in a minute. We get another fun little callback to Doctor Strange's solo movie with this scene.
This way. Sorcerer Armani.
No, it's Strange.
Not any stranger than any other name in this world.
Doctor. Mr. Doctor.
It's strange.
Maybe. Who am I to judge?
We are then taken to what I believe is the World Tree, a concept used by the Asgardians to describe the cosmic nimbus, with each branch or root representing one of the 9 realms. We saw it for the first time in Captain America the First Avenger, where the Tesseract was hidden in its roots, which Red Skull ended up stealing. Doctor Strange then finds the book he was looking for, Time Manipulation. But notice just before that, he verbally mentions 3 other books.
Transmutation, telekinesis, teleportation.
Transmutation, telekinesis, and teleportation, all of which are the powers that both he and Wanda have in the Marvel Comics. Now, in the book that talks about time manipulation, we can clearly see this red symbol, which we've seen previously in his solo movie. Even the lines that are in red are similar in both versions. Another quick little detail I noticed is when Steven was scanning all the books, they were flying all over the place. But as soon as he finds the one he's looking for, the rest of the books return to their previous positions. And notice he also tore some pages while reading the book. Now, I'm not sure if the pages are from the same book, but I doubt that. And I also don't think tearing a page is a problem for someone who can literally put it back together. Now, I found another very significant detail over here. The first page Steven opens up, although has the same symbol as in the movie, but these two are not the same page. How do I know that? Look at the page beside that. It doesn't match. However, as soon as Steven turns the page over, that's when both of these pages match with the movie version. And this is also the page where Steven finds the solution to his problem.
Aha.
gain the power through the absorption of other beings.
So now if you think deeply, our version of Strange already read this page that contains the answer of breaking an absolute point. Strange then summons a mystical being as instructed in the book, but in his haste and out of arrogance, he summoned the most powerful one first, without starting with the little ones. Now this creature is what I think is Shuma-Gorath. Whether or not this is the same version of Shuma-Gorath that we've seen in episode 1 remains to be seen. Strange of course fails to absorb its power, but thankfully Obeying comes to his rescue. Obeying also warns Dr. Strange that there's a very fine line between devotion and delusion, but arrogant Strange of course doesn't listen, and starts absorbing the powers of other beings all over again. But this time he doesn't start with Shuma-Gorath. He starts small. Notice how each time he absorbs a demon, it changes his look accordingly. And I absolutely love the part where he literally steals a cape from a freaking roach and sends it back to its universe because he draws the line at bugs. And notice when he absorbs this bat-like creature, even his cape shapeshifts into a bat for a second. And that's the moment the Watcher gives his commentary. He says how he could intervene and warns Stephen.
But the fate of his universe is not worth risking the safety of all others.
And that's the moment we learn that Doctor Strange is one of the only beings who is sensitive to the Watcher's presence.
Hello? Who's that?
He could sense that someone is watching over him, and it makes sense though. A sorcerer with knowledge and wisdom like his would surely know about the existence of the Watcher. Now at one point we see him in a form that resembles Dormammu. Now of course this is not Dormammu, because he also has horns and fangs like demons. But this confirms that Stephen absorbed a creature that is from the Dark Dimension. At the end Stephen summons Shuma-Gorath once again as now he's ready to capture its powers. But notice this is the only creature Stephen chose to kill first before he absorbed it. This goes to show just how powerful Shuma-Gorath is compared to the rest of the creatures he captured. He needed to make sure it's dead before he consumed it. We then learned that this process of Stephen absorbing powers from all these mystical creatures took centuries, but he used magic to keep himself frozen in time. And I totally became a fan of this episode when I saw how beautifully it was revealed to us that centuries have gone by.
But I can reverse this. You will live longer. Forever.
Trust me, the writing in this episode could even beat some of the live-action movies. Now let me ask you a question. If you're a comic book reader, you'll know that Cagliostro wanted eternal life more than anything else, right? Now tell me who in this episode wanted eternal life the most? Is it Wong? Is it Obeying? Or is it Strange? So now tell me, who in this episode fits perfectly with the character of Cagliostro? That's right, Obeying is not Cagliostro in this universe. This evil version of Strange is. He's a reincarnation of the character. Cuts back to the Sanctum Sanctorum where this version of Strange doesn't ignore Wong's advice and leaves the Eye of Agamotto as it is. However, when he comes outside, he finds the fabric of his reality breaking apart. And notice the first thing he says after seeing it.
What was in that whiskey?
Strange did say something similar even in his solo movie.
What did you just do to me?
I pushed your astral form out of your physical form.
What's in that tea? Psilocybin? LSD?
Just tea.
So it seems as though whenever Stephen is brought upon something strange, he always tends to blame it on his ring. Then we learn that the Ancient One was forced to split the timeline into two, and for the first time ever, there were two Doctor Strange living simultaneously in one universe. Ancient One had to do this because the other Strange just wouldn't listen. So now this good version of Strange has to defeat the evil one in order to save the fabric of reality. And for some reason, I find it really funny that Wong was so composed even when he could see that he was slowly disintegrating. We then meet Strange Supreme for the first time in the MCU, who tries to convince Doctor Strange that they should both work together to bring Christine back. We get an epic battle between Strange Supreme and Doctor Strange. There are a few callbacks to Infinity War, but I'm sure you've noticed it already, so I won't break it down too much. But notice this symbol on Strange Supreme's suit, which is missing from Doctor Strange's suit. This is a comic-accurate symbol from classic Doctor Strange comics. Although this symbol is actually white in the comics, but I'm glad they decided to add this touch to Strange Supreme's outfit. Strange Supreme then brings Doctor Strange inside the mirror dimension and shows him an illusion of what it's gonna be like to have Christine back once again. But as soon as Doctor Strange notices the glitch on her face, he realizes it's not real, and it's the mirror dimension. The battle continues, but Strange Supreme finally absorbs Doctor Strange and becomes whole again, therefore reaching the peak of his power. And notice after Evil Strange absorbed Stephen Strange, his magic turned from green to red, and we know that Chaos magic is also red. This means the power of the Time Stone is now being overshadowed by Chaos magic. He then successfully reverses the absolute point by bringing Christine back to life. And here we can visually see all the creatures he's harnessing to break the absolute point. We can see the wings of bats, the tentacles of Gorath, and the demonic horns. Now, as soon as Christine comes back to life, the destruction of reality speeds up. Strange then begs the Watcher to fix it, but the Watcher, living up to his name, explained why he won't interfere. This universe then gets sucked into this void. Now, this was a very heavy ending compared to the first 3 episodes, and just like in WandaVision, Strange in this episode goes through the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. The stakes were high and real. We didn't get a fancy savior at the end, neither did we get any happy ending. I think this episode was just perfect, and it's gonna be so tough to top this one in the next episodes. So in the words of the Watcher, one life, one choice, one moment can destroy the entire universe. Or in my words, if Stephen Strange cannot overcome his arrogance, that universe is bound to be doomed. And that's it. This would be my breakdown of What If Episode 4 in 0.25x speed. I hope I was able to give you lads a few new details. Hey everyone, I'm the Canadian Lad, and today I watched What If Episode 2 at 0.25x speed. This is gonna be a complete breakdown plus my 0.25x speed analysis. So I'm gonna go scene by scene and try to explain everything that's happening, while showing you lads some hidden details that I caught in slow motion. But before I begin, I'd like to take 55 seconds to tell you about our amazing sponsor, powerful weapon than you've got from behind. It's a free gift. Use my link to your friends list and spoils the appearance of Land. See you in the game, lads. First things first, the opening credits actually spoiled the appearance of Thanos. When I first saw Josh Brolin given credits, I immediately knew Thanos was coming. So today's episode asks, what if T'Challa was Star-Lord instead of Peter Quill? Even though the first episode didn't have much of a story change, it basically just replaced Peggy Carter with Steve Rogers, and most of the story remained the same, but that's not the case for today's episode. T'Challa, being Star-Lord, made some significant changes in this particular timeline. For example, in the Sacred Timeline, nobody initially really values Star-Lord.
Star-Lord. Who? Star-Lord, man. Legendary outlaw?
But in this one, Korath is essentially a fan of Star-Lord.
Star-Lord! I'm a huge fan of your work. What are you doing here?
That was not the reaction I was expecting.
This is probably because of the reputation T'Challa has built up for himself in this universe. Now notice T'Challa's Star-Lord has purple eyes on his helmet, whereas our Star-Lord used to have red. Now purple is a color closely associated with Black Panther. The Wakandan heart-shaped herb, which basically gives you all the powers of Black Panther, is purple. So this could be a visual nod to T'Challa still having connections to Wakanda. And notice he still wears the Black Panther necklace around his neck. So basically the animators gave him everything a Wakandan king should have, while still keeping him Star-Lord. We get a little bit of callback to Infinity War with this scene.
Should we be bowing? I feel like we should be bowing. Unless we should be kneeling.
Should we bow? Yeah, he's a king.
What are you doing?
We don't do that here.
But notice when Korath was about to kneel down, it actually scares Star-Lord. He wasn't expecting Korath to be such a fanboy, so he steals the Power Stone and rescues Korath. As soon as he comes out, he gets outnumbered by all the soldiers sent by Ronan. But thankfully Yondu comes to his rescue and kills all of the soldiers in the way he always does. Now notice what Yondu says to T'Challa.
If we wanted to have some real fun, we'd make like the old days and sell this bad boy to the highest bidder.
So Yondu is talking about a time before T'Challa changed his life, saying back in the old days he would have sold it to the highest bidder. Now this is exactly what our Star-Lord does in the main timeline. He went to this weird looking broker to sell the Power Stone.
You got the best eyebrows in the business.
T'Challa then talks about how changing lifestyles has allowed Yondu to keep all of his original teeth, because in the main timeline, Yondu has several gold chompers, but in this alternate reality, he does seem to have a full pack of pearly whites. We then see T'Challa's ship, which again incorporates the color purple, but notice it is called Mandela. Peter Quill's ship from the Guardians was called the Milano. It was named after the 1980s actress Alyssa Milano, but T'Challa named his after Nelson Mandela. This very small detail basically outlines all the differences between these two characters. We come back to Earth in 1988, where a young T'Challa is talking to his father T'Chaka. Now King T'Chaka is dressed exactly the way we've seen him dressed in Black Panther, but notice T'Challa's willingness to open Wakanda and let the world see it for what it is.
I am tired of living in a bubble. There's an entire world out there, Baba.
And indeed, in the main timeline, T'Challa was the one who opened the doors of Wakanda to the world. Now one night, young T'Challa was playing with his spear, but the spear passes the force field and goes outside of Wakanda. As a result, T'Challa had to cross the border, and that is the exact moment a Ravager spacecraft arrives to abduct the spawn of a celestial ego. Yondu had given the job to Taserface and Kraglin to abduct Peter Quill, so they both were looking for something that doesn't belong to Earth. And what doesn't belong to Earth? Anything that's from Wakanda.
Cosmic readings where he was took nearly broke our dial. If there was anything not from that planet on that planet, it's there.
This is them referring to the meteorite that gave birth to Wakanda. So finding a piece of Wakanda outside of Wakanda, Kraglin and Taserface thought this is what they're looking for, which results in abducting the wrong kid. Cut to present time, where T'Challa arrives in this club along with his entire crew. They all share a drink and talk about T'Challa's achievements. But unlike the main timeline, Skrulls in this reality may actually be on the wrong side, just like in the comics.
What about the central bank heist at Darnex 4?
Never hurts to hurt a scroll, right?
Darnex 4 is the homeworld of the Skrulls, but in Captain Marvel we saw them kicked out of their own homeland. Now T'Challa prevented a lot of chaos, and might have also prevented Skrulls from getting thrown out of their own homes, so not losing their homes might have boosted their ego, making Skrulls villains in this reality. So T'Challa saving everyone he can doesn't always pan out nicely. And then we get this massive reveal of Thanos as a member of the Ravagers. So it looks like in this version of reality, T'Challa convinced Thanos to not decimate half the universe, instead use the Infinity Stones to double up the resources. But notice there's a hidden detail in the background above in the balcony. This distinctive yellow shoulder plates look like the uniforms worn by the Nova Corps. So not only the Ravagers come here for a drink, even Xandarians can be seen here. We then meet Drax, who's not standing still and serving drinks at the club. He mentions how Star-Lord saved his family from a Kree invasion. So unlike the main timeline, in this reality Drax's daughter and wife both are alive and happy, all thanks to T'Challa. But one thing that remained the same is Drax's brutal honesty.
You look terrible. I look great.
I am hideous?
You are horrifying to look at.
Notice T'Challa was already feeling uncomfortable being grabbed by Drax. But the moment Drax says, "I insist we should take another picture," T'Challa gets even more furious.
We should take another one.
I'm sure it's fine.
No, I insist.
Unfortunately, Drax wasn't voiced by Dave Bautista due to some miscommunication. Nonetheless, we know Dave is coming back to reprise his role in Guardians Volume 3, and that's all we need right now. We then meet Nebula for the first time, who in this timeline has perfect blonde hair. So T'Challa making Thanos change his ways also made a huge impact on Nebula's life. In the main timeline, Nebula explained that Thanos would replace a part of her organic body every time she lost a training fight to Gamora. But the fact that she only has a cybernetic eye and the rest of her body is perfectly fine indicates T'Challa must have intervened before Thanos could make any more changes to her body. And notice, even though this Nebula was tortured way less than our Nebula, but she still covers the only cybernetic eye she has with her hair. We learn how she still despises her father, but T'Challa tries to amend that.
You mean your father?
He's lucky I call him the big guy.
You know he gardens now. You should talk to him. He really has changed.
T'Challa says Thanos has become a gardener, which is of course a direct callback to Avengers Endgame. Nebula says but the past doesn't change, and that's why T'Challa still carries this necklace. T'Challa did try to go back home, but Yondu lied to him, saying Wakanda had been destroyed. So T'Challa losing his home made him realize the value of it, and that's why he thrives to save everyone else's. Nebula comes up with the mission of extracting this thing called Embers of Genesis, which has the ability to terraform entire ecosystems. With just 1 ounce of Embers of Genesis, you can literally heal a dying planet in minutes. But the only problem is the person holding the Embers of Genesis is Tunnelier Tivan, aka the Collector, who's basically the most ruthless kingpin in the intergalactic underworld. Thanos used to hold his title, but ever since he turned good, the Collector saw an opportunity and filled that void. We then get another callback to Avengers 1 and Thor Ragnarok.
Loki is beyond reason, but he is of Asgard, and he is my brother.
He killed 80 people in 2 days.
He's adopted.
I've never met this man in my life.
He's my brother. Adopted.
She's your offspring?
Adopted.
I love that this adopted theme keeps coming up again and again in the MCU. We then go to nowhere, and according to the plan, Thanos and Korath cause a distraction, while T'Challa runs to find the Embers of Genesis. Notice while they were planning, the screens were set up in a way that resembles when the Avengers planned their time heist. We then come to know that the Black Order is now serving the Collector. They're basically guarding all of the Collector's collections. Now among the collections, there's a tardigrade. Tardigrades are one of nature's smallest animals. They're never more than 1.5 millimeter long and can only be seen with a microscope. So why is it relevant here? It's because we've seen tardigrades already living inside the quantum realm. Scott Lang had gotten so small that even a tardigrade appeared this big relative to him. So the Collector having this micro animal among his collection might indicate that he has taken stuff from the quantum realm as well. Karina, voiced by the same actress, then introduces us to the Collector. He seems to be standing in front of a rhinoceros, which I think is another stolen animal from Wakanda. Over here, T'Challa passes by this space dog, aka Cosmo, a character who has appeared in both the Marvel Comics and the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. We even see a dark elf just like we've seen in live action. T'Challa then asks for help from Howard the Duck, played by the same voice actor Seth Green, who knows the way to the Embers. Notice what he says here.
When you're out of luck, always go duck.
I'm pretty sure no one says that.
Oh, they say it.
Really?
Totally.
He said something similar in Guardians Volume 2.
You're out of luck until you've gone duck.
Then he stops for a drink at this bar. You notice the bartender, which is actually a robot. This is a nice little callback to Thor Ragnarok, where a robotic bartender serves Valkyrie a drink. Proxima Midnight realizes it was a diversion caused by the Ravagers. She orders an immediate lockdown, and here we again get to see Nebula with her signature hairstyle. She prefers hiding her cybernetic eye at all times. There's one more detail about this, I'll talk about it later. Because of the doors closing, T'Challa had to leave Howard the Duck at the bar and escape. In the next shot, he runs through a hangar containing various ships. From left to right, we can see a variation of Peter Quill's Milano, Captain Marvel's prototype jet, this green spaceship which I think is one of Grandmaster's from Thor Ragnarok, a Star Blaster that belongs to the Nova Corps, and just behind it might be an X-Wing fighter from Star Wars. Then there's a Necrocraft piloted by the Ronin soldiers. And in the center we see the Commodore, which is the laser vessel of Grandmaster. Now on the right we see an Avengers Quinjet, and this Quantum Realm vessel of Hank Pym. Now I've already told you the Collector may have been to the Quantum Realm, and this is the ship he might have used to get there. T'Challa's necklace then lights up, and he comes across a ship that is from Wakanda. Now this ship was sent by T'Challa's father to find his son, and in the journey the Collector must have seen it and kept it. You notice there were mannequins wearing Dora Milaje outfits. I think Tivan must have done something really dark here. He probably killed the Dora Milaje piloting this ship, and then put their uniform on these mannequins, or turned them into mannequins. We'll probably see the same thing in all the other ships. That is very gruesome, to be honest. And notice how this Wakandan ship just activates as soon as T'Challa enters it. This is probably because of the necklace that he's wearing. He watches the recorded message from his Baba and realizes Yondu lied to him. Wakanda was never destroyed. In fact, they're still looking for T'Challa. Nebula then double-crosses T'Challa and hands him over to Tivan along with all the other Ravagers. Tivan then puts him in a glass cage, while Nebula comes to the prison to rescue the Ravagers. So she's the one who got them caught, and now she's the one saving them? This confuses the Ravagers as to whose side she really is. So she explains this was always the plan. The plan was to get caught in the first place. They notice in the flashback scene where Nebula and T'Challa were planning, for a few seconds Nebula moves her hair, showing T'Challa one of her weaknesses. She did it once before, and that was in front of T'Challa as well. This implies how this version of Nebula is attracted to T'Challa. T'Challa is the only one she trusts, and feels no shame in appearing as she is. Nebula managed to find the Embers, and T'Challa over here escapes this glass cage with the help of his necklace. But it doesn't go far, as Tivan stops him and we enter the final fight. Now Tivan shows off a lot of weapons that he possesses. He has Captain America's a shield, Thor's hammer, and a dagger forged in dark matter taken from the ruler of the Dark Elf, aka Malekith. It's a bummer he went for the dagger instead of using the hammer. That would have been way cooler, I reckon. Nonetheless, he ends up using Hela's headpiece, and strikes the exact same pose as she did in Thor Ragnarok. Tivan also has a piece of Korg, which he now uses as a glove, meaning he killed Korg. I told you this version of the Collector is way more brutal than the live-action one. And notice T'Challa still has a little bit of Black Panther left in him. He fights like a panther, jumping from cell to cell and dodging Tivan. I mean, you may take the boy out of Wakanda, but you can never take Wakanda out of the boy. Our Mad Titan then says his name for the first time in the MCU.
Crazy? You'll never take them yourself.
Not crazy. Mad.
Cull Obsidian then strikes his hammer on Thanos. This is the exact same shot frame by frame that we've seen in Infinity War with Peter Parker. Cull Obsidian and Proxima Midnight almost kill Thanos, but to his rescue comes Nebula. She unleashes the Embers of Genesis and escapes with Thanos. Now over here Yondu comes to save T'Challa, and I love how the Guardian score plays in the background.
Yondu,
T'Challa and Yondu use the sticky fingers trick on Tivan and steal his bracelet, the same trick that Tony played on Thanos in Endgame. I mean, I didn't know it's called sticky fingers, but now we know. Now notice when Yondu was taking the punches from Tivan in order to steal his bracelet, Yondu's hands were constantly busy stealing it, and as soon as he was done, he let go of Tivan's hand. This is another great hidden detail. Karina then releases everyone, and Tivan receives the same sort of treatment his brother got at the end of Thor Ragnarok. T'Challa and Yondu use the Wakandan ship and escape from nowhere. Now this was supposed to be a severed head of an ancient celestial, but at the end, because of the Embers of Genesis, it now looks alive. Who knows what the Embers of Genesis is capable of? We then see Cosmo the space dog also escape from the cages of the Collector, just like it escaped in the live-action movie as well. We then get to Wakanda and see a very happy reunion. Now while Okoye and Thanos were having a conversation, Thanos embarrasses his daughter by again bringing up his genocidal plan. But notice what Nebula says here.
And I might add, efficient.
Oh, Dad!
She calls Thanos her dad. This shows how far the relationship has come throughout this episode. At the beginning, she didn't even like talking to him, and now she calls him dad. Cut to an ordinary Peter Quill now working in a restaurant while listening to music on his headphones. Now our version of Peter Quill also uses the same orange headphones. He meets his father Ego, who has now come to take him. Now his live-action ship can be spotted parked outside. Cut to the screen where Marvel pays a tribute to the late Chadwick Boseman. Hearing Chadwick's voice again after Endgame in the MCU is really an honor, and I'm so excited that there were at least 3 more episodes where we'll get to hear Chadwick Boseman again. And on that note, I'd like to end today's video, but please give me a thumbs up if you got to learn anything.